So, Nick Rosado, welcome to my podcast. It's really great to have you here joining me. You recently presented to our Atlantis members meeting at the Australian Centre for Objectivism, and it was really great to hear you talk about your courses. So I'm looking at your website now. You run courses on the Iliad, the Aeneid, the Divine Comedy, and Paradise Lost, and that's just in 2026. So you are developing yourself into a very serious expert on the classics, and I find that very inspiring. You are extremely passionate about your work, and I hope that in the course of our conversation today we can cover how you got into the classics, what motivates you, your ultimate ambition to produce your own work, and everything you've been doing. So welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Maxim. It sounds like a plan. I also want to say, I said this in your in the meeting you just mentioned before to you, but you just have to suffer through it again and hear me say it a second time. I just want to mention for the podcast, I met Maxim, I think a couple of years ago it's been, and when I met him, to cut to the chase, I was impressed and I was very happy with the person I met, and Maxim is a really just impressive man. So it's really good being here, Maxim. I'm privileged to be invited on your podcast, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you. So tell me about your educational background. What happened when you were 17? What changed in your life? How did you make that fateful decision? What was that decision, and what happened from then until now?
Sure. So when I was 17, a big scope of years to cover, so I'll try to condense it. When I was 17, that's basically when I read Anthem, by Ayn Rand. I'm sure your audience knows. And from there, I found the Fountainhead and Atlas, and I ended up becoming an objectivist. And before getting to my education, it was when I was 17, 18, when I decided to become a fiction writer. I wanted to write a novel, and I still do. Only now I also want to write an epic poem, because the novel wasn't hard enough, right? So I decided I want to be a writer. And fast forward into my education, I went to university for 2 years. I got my degree at Clemson University, and I was part of and graduated from the Lyceum program, which was created by C. Bradley Thompson. He's an objectivist. He created a whole humanities program, undergraduate program, the only kind that it exists with respect to like an objectivist created university, like almost anything at this point. So it's really impressive. And I got the privilege to receive that education and study under him multiple times, as well as with the rest of the faculty. And then from there, I started teaching in K through 12 education. I was specifically a Montessori elementary teacher. And then eventually I was, after a couple of years, Lisa Van Dam's literature apprentice. I was effectively kind of like an intern. I got to sit in on her specific 7th and 8th grade classes. And I just got to be a fly on the wall. And I got to just see everything she does and how she teaches, the content, the method, the spirit. And I like to proudly say that I did not miss a single day of that apprenticeship. I'm very proud about that fact. And yeah, during that time, go ahead.
We continue. Let's just go over a few of the things that you've already mentioned.
Sure.
We'll go roughly in the order. So I want to cover Anthem, the Lyceum program, which I believe is taught by Brad Thompson, who's
right.
Is that right?
Yep, there it is. The America's Revolutionary Mind.
Yeah. And I also want to cover your experience at the Van Damme Academy before we go any further. So
Sure.
Tell me about how Anthem really was the turning point for you.
It's really special, actually. It's a special story because at the time, I mean, now, like, as you said at the beginning, I'm teaching these courses on this high level literature, like epic poetry. I mean, that's like really difficult stuff, you know, to like really just like sink your teeth in and really, let alone become an expert in insofar as one can. It's tough stuff. And at the time when I was 17, I hated reading. I did not like reading at all, fiction, nonfiction. You couldn't get me to do it. And so when I was assigned Anthem, the first assignment was just read chapter 1. That's it. So I was like, okay, well, I know she's going to assign chapter 2 tomorrow. So I read chapter 2. And then like, well, that wasn't that bad. I read chapter 3, and like that wasn't that bad either.
And where
So
was this? Where was this? Your high school, I assume?
yeah, just public school, nothing notable.
But you were reading Anthem in a American public school.
I was. That's true.
Okay. It's good that that's on the curriculum. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, so you were assigned chapter 1 of Anthem, which is pretty short. Yeah.
And then I kept on reading, and you know, fast forward, I like an hour and a half passed, the sun was down. It literally felt like an instant. And I was like, oh my God, my first thought was like, I just read a whole book without anyone telling me to. And then my second thought, of course, was, and I loved it. This was amazing. And yeah, it was the plot, it was the characters. I love the idealism, the romanticism, you could say, the stringent pursuit of values, and how was deadly serious for those characters. The story spoke for itself. It spoke for itself. The characters spoke for themselves. So that was the importance of Anthem to me, and that's what got me to everything after that.
And to that segment of the audience that may not be objectivist or may have not read all of Ayn Rand's literature, it's worth just mentioning that Anthem was, I think, Ayn Rand's second novel. I think We the Living came first by about a year or two. But it's really a novella. It's shorter than a novel, and it's about well, Nick, why don't you tell us what is Anthem about?
Sure, it's a dystopian literature. It's in that genre, like 1984, Fahrenheit. And the basic premise of this story is it takes place in the future. And society has just like crumbled to the point of like a primitive, not a primitive society, but kind of like a middle age, dark age society where it's like there's no taller buildings and like I think 2 or 3 stories. They just use like candles instead of electricity because like they lost that. So society has totally regressed, and it follows the main character, Equality 74521, if I'm not mistaken. That's his name. These people in this society aren't even given names. And the very first line in the book is, "It is a sin to write this." And so what you do is you follow in this, again, very short book, as Maxim's put it, you follow his journey to discovering, or I should say, rediscovering the word I, as in like the first person pronoun. Those pronouns, the first person pronouns, I, me, myself, those are all gone. So everyone refers to each other as we. So we, Maxim, and I, and if I'm saying like, oh, I really like, literature, instead you would say, we really like literature. Okay, so that's the dystopian freakiness of it all. And so you follow his story, and that's very apparent, like on page 1. It's not hardly a spoiler. So you follow his journey in rediscovering that, and it's a moving story.
It's a story about the selfishness of values, about how only an individual can have values, that there's no such thing as some kind of collectivized value. It's a great piece of literature. So you read that in one sitting, and then what changed? You said that you discovered Rand's other works, and then started. What prompted you to get into the classics specifically?
Yeah, so it wasn't just as a quick like what happened after that.
Yes.
For a year, nothing. I was just like, but I really like that. I still kind of don't like reading. Like that didn't really change, but I like this book. So I kept the author in the back of my mind. And then a year later, I had to choose a book to read. So I chose The Fountainhead, right? And so then a couple years later, I end up going to the objectivist conferences in the objectivist movement. And I went to one conference, and there was a speaker named Lisa Van Dam. And for those in the audience who doesn't know who this is, basically she's a master literature teacher. I live here in Laguna Hills, near Irvine, Orange County, here in California. She has a school named Van Dam Academy, like 15 minutes from here.
Mhm.
And she started it all on her own. It's a K through 8 school. And she is a speaker. She's a master literature teacher. She's translates French poetry. She's very well versed in education philosophy, philosophy of education. She had to be to found this whole school. And so she wears a lot of hats, but in this context, I got the privilege to watch her give a talk on poetry. And I love telling this story because I don't remember a single detail about that talk, like the content. I just remember looking to my right at some point, just like, how's everyone else doing? And people are just crying. And like, I'm feeling the tears too. And it was just this wonderfully elevated and benevolent and frankly sacred talk that she gave. And she was talking about poetry, and that meant literature. And it's not, I wasn't really she wasn't like saying like, oh, read this specific book or that one or this one. She was just saying the beauty and joy of poetry as such. And in my head, I was like, well, I don't know where to start, but if this is what literature is like, great classic literature, sign me up. I want to get in on whatever this is. And so that's when I was like, okay, so where do I start? And we have the great fortune of having a great canon, the great Western canon of classics, the greatest of the great, the best of the best literary texts in our culture for the last 3,000 years. I knew about the Iliad, I knew about the Odyssey, I knew about the Greeks, the Romans, the Germans, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment. And so I knew there were these great texts, and I was like, okay, well, I'll start there. So that's how I got into the classics. It was from you could say, a certain almost faith I had in the classics from Lisa Van Dam and the power of her talk. Like, again, like this stuff must just be that great if it can make me and others feel profoundly moved and special. So
Yeah, so I've listened to some of Lisa Van Dam's talks at OCONs and other conferences, and they're very interesting. So that must have been amazing. So you then did an apprenticeship, but was that? I guess that would have been after spending 2 years at Clemson University, right?
correct.
So tell me about your experience at Clemson.
Oh, yeah. So the context is that I was originally, I grew up in New York, Long Island, New York, which is like, for me specifically, that's like an hour and a half from Manhattan, the city proper. And I originally signed up to go to a local New York private liberal arts college. And the short of it was that I frankly hated it. It was horrible. I felt just terrible going to those classes and in that environment.
Let's
And
pause on
what,
that. Because of
yeah,
the assigned text, was it some kind of postmodern, 20th century literature that you hated? James Joyce and all
yeah,
that?
it
Yeah.
was, it was, it was some of that, but honestly, it was also the absence of the positive.
Mhm.
Like we get to seriously talk about these texts. We get to talk about philosophy. Obviously, I care. Obviously, you care. The people watching this care. And like we get to have this great, I don't like communal experience, but like a communal experience based in self-interest and reason and values and achievement and all these good things. When you go to a standard college, you don't get that because most people who go to college, undergraduates, don't want to be there. Who knew?
Mm.
So it was that absence of like that serious intellectual just
Mhm.
community, environment, atmosphere. that was just as suffocating as like you were saying, the leftist postmodernist thought.
So in terms of the assigned texts, because of course, I hear great things about Clemson. I don't know it, apart from what you and a handful of others have told me. But what I'd like to understand is what is the mainstream environment, because this is, relevant to understanding our culture and the philosophy underneath our culture, and understanding the reasons why the kind of work you're doing, which is so important, is so rare, and why the appreciation for the classics is so rare. Even for you, a very reverential, passionate person, you had to be exposed to this in the first place. And that meant, I guess you were fortunate to encounter Anthem in a public American school, but that is not something everyone gets to see. And then many of them would not even appreciate it, to nearly the same extent. So tell me a bit about, so how long did you spend in New York at this college?
That was a year and a half, 2 years, something like that.
And what was that curriculum like, and what was the general attitude to education you saw there?
Yeah, and this is a good question. It's good context for what we're going to talk about, all this positive, elevated, noble stuff. The context for and this is nothing. I don't have like any unique insights. This is more or less me now reporting on what the standard experience is. There's plenty of YouTube videos on this, but the standard experience is that insofar as you engage with these texts, I think more or less two things happen. One is you're just straight up not assigned these texts. So you won't even be assigned the Iliad, or you won't even be assigned the Aeneid or the Divine Comedy, or multiple of these figures. And if you are assigned these texts somehow, then the party line experience that you get is, this is just my experience, and there's nothing else I can say. The standard experience you get is, oh, well, Homer and Shakespeare and these characters, they were sexist and misogynistic and patriarchal and supported, imperialist, capitalist, Western thought. And you've all heard this before. This is nothing new. But that is the experience. And again, I always go back to this theme. That's bad enough. But the real issue is the absence of the positive. It's, why is Achilles so awesome? Why is Aeneas a figure for greatness? Why is Beatrice just perfect idealism? Why is, Adam and Eve and Satan in Paradise Lost, like and you go down the whole line for the canon. Students don't get that. They don't get the incredible experience, the moral knowledge, the spiritual elevation. I sometimes say that reading great classic literature is like soul craft, crafting the soul. It really is just determining and deciding what you want your character to be, what you want your values to be, your principles, and then how to even do those things and execute on those goals. Students don't get any of that. And instead, again, it's this, at best, boring, monotonous experience. At worst, nihilistic hatred of the good, the classics, for being the good.
I was about to say that. So our modern culture, and I take it this is not quite as bad in the US as it is in other Western countries. It certainly is quite bad in Australia, and I take it is in the UK. And I promise we'll get to the positive. That's what I really want to talk about today. But I think kind of explaining this context will just help bring out how positive the positive really is. You've pointed to a kind of egalitarian nihilism, which is completely the opposite of the hero worship and exceptionalism, the admiration of the exceptional and the excellent and the great that is required to enjoy, the classics. And it does point to the kind of philosophical deterioration that has happened in the West since some of those classics were, created. And of course, it's philosophy has had many different evolutions, so I'm massively simplifying here, but at least you would probably agree that in ancient Greece, the values they had really extolled greatness, whereas here, say in Australia, we have tall poppy syndrome, the view that you should never stick your head up because you'll get cut down. That is, you can never show that you really have talent or you're great in some way because you'll be undermined. And I'm sure that there's aspects of that in the initial education you received. So do you have anything to add to that before we move on to your experience at Clemson after that?
No, I agree with your gloss over it. I just on the ancient Greek point of things, one of their, I think maybe their core virtue is arete, which means excellence. And like that was being the best warrior or the best poet or the best sculptor or even the best husband or the best wife or the best friend you can be to your friends or the best son, the best daughter. It was so much about achieving excellence in whatever field you are, whatever relationships you have to others. Like it was a very different culture than this tall poppy one that you're talking about for Australia, which I'm thankfully not in, I guess.
I do my best in my TA work in philosophy at ANU to try to be a bit of a contrast to that. But you can only do so much when you're teaching philosophy and not literature, or something as aestheticized as that. So, okay. Have you listened to Leonard Peikoff's talk, "Why Ancient Greece is My Favorite Civilization"?
I have.
Yeah, that's a good one. Highly recommend that as well. Yeah. Okay, so then what changed? So you left New York and you moved to South Carolina?
Yes. I just because that also is a bit of a sweet special story. One day I got home from class in New York, and I was just like, I had just a terrible day. The students were leftists, and I was the only like rational person. At least I'd like to think I was. And it was just very antagonistic. And again, the absence of the positive. I know I want like this, not that. So I get home and I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling happy. But I turn on the Yaron Brooks show. He's live, and he has a man I've never seen or heard of before. His name is C. Bradley Thompson. And C. Bradley Thompson is talking about this university program. He's talking about his students. He's talking about, we read, the great classics in philosophy and political philosophy and all this. And we also read Ayn Rand, and we also read Jane Austen and whoever else. And at the end, he was like, so if you're a college student, you should definitely, if you're thinking about college, you should definitely reach out. And in my head, I'm like, am I going to move? Would I even move to South Carolina? Would I even do this? Would I even do that? And would they even accept me? Who am I? But I just go, let's just try. So I type out an email, like 3 paragraphs long, and then like not even an hour later, I get back an email. It's from the secretary, Bedina Allison. And I'll never forget this because she said in that email, "Oh, Nick, you're exactly the kind of student we want." That was very touching.
Yeah.
And fast forward, I get accepted. I move to South Carolina, and like, I think it was like in 4 or 6 weeks. And it was just like, boom, I knew it. I knew I wanted to do that. So I moved to South Carolina, and yes, I get into Clemson in the spring semester, if I'm not mistaken. And that's when I get into my Lyceum courses.
That's wonderful. And tell me about those courses. What changed?
Yeah, so the courses were on specifically political philosophy, and sometimes it might dip into like philosophy, sometimes a little literature, but it was mainly political philosophy. Focus on really 2 things, I would say: the American founding and the just great classical liberal tradition reading Hobbes and John Stuart Mill, and also reading a bunch of the kind of free market thinkers like von Mises and Hazlitt and Hayek and all these, different individuals. And also, but we also read like Karl Marx and like, antagonistic figures. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, definitely not one of the good guys, I think.
Yep.
And yeah, that was the curriculum. And yeah, it was just a huge improvement. Just the fact that I got to read these great minds in the first place was a huge improvement. And when it comes to the experience, I will say there were two halves to the Lyceum program. One was the Lyceum Scholars and one was the Lyceum Fellows. The Scholars was the full-blown thing. Like that was when you were in a cohort with other students and you were in the same classes all the time and you had a mentor. I wasn't in that one. And I wasn't in that one because you could only get into that one when you're a freshman. And I wasn't. So I was in the Lyceum Fellows, which was you just take like the same courses, but there's no there's really like nothing else beyond that. It's just like take the courses and whoever you're with, you're with. And when it comes to that, the students were definitely much higher caliber than like most students, I think, in general in higher education. Though, like it was a capitalism program. It was like, this is the Clemson Institute for the Study of Capitalism, CISC. That's what the institute was called. And, I did notice that a lot of the students already were actually on board of capitalism, which was funny. You wouldn't really expect that in a university setting,
You wouldn't
like at all.
expect that anywhere.
Yeah. So, and then like there were other students that just were like, I need a minor and I'm gonna do this. So when it comes to that part, it wasn't exactly what I wanted, but again, it was a big improvement from what I had in New York. So overall, it was a very good experience, and the faculty I think was my favorite. Getting to study with Brad Thompson and all the other professors, that was the really special part for me.
Yes, I think that can make all the difference. So just to make it about me for a minute, I've been working towards, just to give you a little break and let you catch your breath. I've been working toward, getting my confirmation, which is something you have to do 1 year into your PhD. You do a presentation to the faculty and all the grad students for 45 minutes on all your research to date. You submit a paper, one of the papers for your thesis, and then you, embrace 45 minutes of very brutal questioning and quite brutal feedback on everything you've presented, and try to handle all the issues that they raise adequately so that you pass. So I did all that, and I did it early, which is quite unusual. And I'm very proud of that because it took a lot of work. But that was only really possible because of the excellent support and just the encyclopedic knowledge provided by my supervisor, Philip Pettit, who is an excellent philosopher. He's very well known in contemporary academic philosophy. So it's been really wonderful. And I completely agree that having even just one person who is much senior to you and who believes in your potential is it's a complete game changer. And I think just having that is so motivating, both, in terms of knowledge, of course, but also spiritually. So, all right.
Absolutely.
And you said you weren't too interested in all the capitalism stuff because you're just not inclined toward politics and economics, I take it. You prefer literature.
Yes.
Is a simple reason. Yeah. Okay. All right. So then tell me about Van Damme Academy. So you graduate. It's only a 2-year program, right? At Clemson?
No, it's a 4-year / you finish it when you finish it program.
And you finished it in half the time.
Well, to be fair, the program you only needed to take like, I think it was like 6 courses. I ended up taking like much more just because I really loved that stuff. But yeah, so it was a minor. Like it was like it's a minor program actually. That's the classification. You get this minor certification on your diploma or whatever it is. So I was able to wrap it up though in 2 years, all the same. Yeah.
So is it a BA, Bachelor of Arts?
Bachelor.
You use a different whole terminology. That's what we call a humanities degree in Australia, is a Bachelor of Arts. What do you call it? BA.
Oh, no, we do. I think, well, I majored in political science just so I could take more of those courses. So I have a Bachelor of Science, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a long time. There's a lot of dust on my diploma. And that's like its own like university curriculum. But the minor I got is in philosophy, but I'm mixing things up. So I have my Lyceum certification. That was technically a minor too, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, the point is, the classification doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
The point is that the program was about like 6 or 8 courses, something like that. And other than that, then you get like a major or like your full-blown thing. So that's the context.
Okay, good. Well, sounds wonderful. So then you move to the Van Damme Academy and you do a year of work there as an apprentice.
So in between that, I actually become a Montessori elementary teacher for 3 years.
Oh.
And during that time, we can talk more about this if you're interested. I don't mind at all. But basically, by the end of that, I was really unhappy and unsatisfied with the Montessori elementary way of doing things in general. And I always knew that Lisa Van Damme existed and Van Damme Academy existed. And I always held on to that in the back of my mind. And so I eventually, there's a whole story to this part too, but I eventually asked Lisa, can I be your apprentice intern person, just observe in your classes? And she got back to me eventually and she said, yes, you can do this. And that's when I moved from Texas to Southern California to do the year-long apprenticeship. Yeah.
And what was that like?
It was like heaven on earth. That's my answer. To give, of course, more color to that picture. I give again like a little special story to warm up the context. I don't know if you ever seen the movie The Matrix. But
I just was rewatching it like the other day.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
For the audience, if anyone hasn't seen it, it's this.
Everyone's seen it. Everyone's seen it.
Okay, everyone's seen it. So there's a really cool guy. His name is Morbius. And he has like black shades and like a black leather jacket thing, trench coat. And for Halloween, American holiday, where you dress up in costumes, Lisa dressed up as Morbius. She had like the black shades and the black trench coat. It was so cool and funny because she never wears black in the first place. So she looked really cool. And the part of the costume
resemblance as well. So that adds to the humor.
And part of the costume is she had in her pockets red jelly beans and blue jelly beans representing the red and blue pills.
Yeah.
And when you would go up to her, she would just silently put her hands out like this. And one of the teachers went up to her and she did it. And he said, he didn't say anything. He picked up the blue pill. And then he said, if this is a simulation, referring to Van Damme Academy, I don't want to leave. So like, just give me a sense of the feeling, the atmosphere of it all. But yeah, what was it like? Again, for me personally, for the apprenticeship, it was is truly special, Maxim. The context is that I was observing in her 7th and 8th grade literature classes specifically. So those were in the mornings, back to back. And I was just a fly on the wall, and I just sat in the side, and I just watched her deliver her lessons day in and day out. And the values that I got from it were threefold. One is the content, so how to teach To Kill a Mockingbird, how to teach Ibsen, how to teach Cyrano de Bergerac, for example, or Victor Hugo, and all these different literary texts and authors. I got the method. Like, now I know how to teach all these different texts, and now I have the method to use where I could teach any text that I want to any students. And the third thing is this spirit. And I'm sure some in your audience don't know who Lisa Van Dam is. She, besides being a very excellent, literature teacher and like the mechanics, like how to do it, she is a very reverential and benevolent person, and she commands a deep respect for just human values, I would say. And so I really do think like part of what I got from that apprenticeship is just, again, crafting my soul. I have this great motto of human reverence and ability right in front of me day in, day out. What is that like? What is that person like day in and day out in this context? And so because reverence and benevolence are core values of mine for my character, and that's the kind of person I want to be, that in and of itself was an education. So I don't know if that's helpful,
No, that's,
but like
that's a wonderful,
yeah.
wonderful answer. Very informative. And yes. So then, at some point recently, you decided to create your own courses and to teach the classics. And I take it that over these years that you've been describing to me, you've been reading the classics in significant detail and analyzing them. Were you reading them in English, or did you also learn Greek? Well,
In
depending.
English.
In English, all in English. Okay. I take it you will have read different translations?
For the 4 texts that I'm using now, kind of, yes. I mean, in the scope of the research that I do, there's a whole bunch of like this scholar's translation and then this scholar's translation, but I haven't read like in full like different translations, if that's what you mean.
Yeah, the only reason I mention that is I haven't read nearly, as much of all this as you have. I probably have read less literature in total, but I remember being in New York in early 2025, and I went to an old bookstore and I purchased this copy of Les Miserables, which I can see just here. And it's an old edition, so the translation is really excellent. I just love reading this particular copy of Les Miserables that I have. I think it might be quite hard to find. And I'm only a little bit through it because I tend to read it at night when I'm about to fall asleep. So I never get more than a few pages done. But it's when I've seen other translations of the same passages online, they just don't have the same effect. I don't think they're as successful. So I do think that the translation that you use matters, and perhaps,
Sure.
So, okay, tell me about your courses. Tell me about how you developed this whole approach, how you decided on these 4 particular texts, and how you've gone about preparing courses. Because I know that you spend enormous time doing research, and you really put a lot of effort into this to create the best value for people. I really want to take your courses, and perhaps soon I will. I'm just, prioritizing many things. But tell me about
Sure.
that.
Yeah, so how come these 4 texts, these 4 authors in particular, and what's the method I use? So again, to reactivate the context, I teach Homer, Virgil, Dante, and Milton, specifically the Iliad, the Aeneid, the Divine Comedy, and Paradise Lost, respectively. So that's 4 texts, 4 epic poems, 4 courses, and 4 quarters throughout the year. 444. And why those four? I mean, there's so many other great artists: Sophocles, Ovid, Victor Hugo, Dostoevsky. You can go down the list. When I was reading the canon, again, like the canon being like the list, it's a list, the list of the best of the best. There was a lot that I loved, and I specifically loved Sophocles, and I almost get tempted to teach him at some point one day. But the special thing about the epic poems, epic poetry, is that there is actually a kind of like unofficial through line between each of those texts. Just to give one sense, the Iliad is about the Trojan War and like the Trojans eventually losing. One of those Trojans is named Aeneas, and he was destined to go found a new civilization. Well, Virgil, fast forward in the Aeneid, about Aeneas picks up right from where the Trojan War ends, with Aeneas taking his father on his back, his son is in his left hand, the statues of his gods from his hearth, and going to found that new civilization, right?
So these four are all connected, because next you're going to say that, well, Virgil, of course, is in Dante. He's the main character who leads Dante through all the circles of heaven and hell. And Paradise Lost, well, references Dante's hell. Is that the idea? That they're all connected?
All the way up to Paradise Lost. So there's the direct from Iliad to the Aeneid to Divine Comedy. For Paradise Lost, there isn't. That's about Adam and Eve. So obviously this is way before, technically, Achilles and all those characters. But the non-direct through lines is like there's still like certain conventions that are always part of epic poetry. The invocation of the muses, the catalog of the ships, the Tychoscopia, which is the viewing from the walls, and you see like a bunch of the characters that's a convention. There's all these different conventions, and it's always about the relationship between man on the one hand and divinity on the other. So, the Greek gods for Greece and God, the God for the Christians, and the angels and such, the afterlife. And in that sense, there's a through line also. And that's much more the focus, for Paradise Lost, and like, oh, Adam and Eve is related to whatever. So that, and really I was taken by the Iliad and the Aeneid and the Divine Comedy, and how there was that through line. It was almost like unofficial sequels. And of course, like that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like these texts really just are incredible. I'm sure we'll get more into that, but I just think they're superior stories to much of the rest of the canon, and they just cover so much, and their characters are so rich with value and so much texture to their souls, and that's how I ended up choosing the four epic poets and the four poems specifically. When it comes to now how I develop the courses, so each course takes about, on average, 400 to 500 hours of work. And the basic method that I have is most of those hours is really dedicated to research, I must say. And what that looks like is just pouring through volume after volume after volume after volume of research on these texts. And in the specific kind that I, read beyond just like general essays and general scholarship is actual line by line dissections of these poems. I wish I had a physical copy of these things. It's online. But what that looks like is, like line 217 of the Iliad. It says this and that. Like you could have like a page and a half worth on just that line of research, and like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And how does this integrate to that? And where does it come up again? And like, there's like for the Cambridge series that I use, it's 6 volumes. So like each one is like on average like 300, 400 pages, something like that. And yeah, it's just a bunch of doing that. It's line by line by line by line, research, research, research. And that's how I like cover all my bases. Again, beyond general essays, general scholarship, general articles. So
And of course, all
that's,
those interpretations are arguing with each other about the
oh yeah,
proper way to interpret some line or another.
yeah. And so you have to sift through what is fact and what is, you know, the concretes versus, okay, well, this is like G.S. Kirk's view and this is Richardson's view and all, in Janko's view and all these different characters.
Who, in your opinion,
Yeah.
is the best scholar of these classics? You can't say yourself. That's that one.
Yeah, I wasn't going to. I wasn't going to. Although I think I'm pretty good. I'm gonna go with, for the Iliad, I'm going to go with 2 people. Emily Van der Veer. She is the one who teaches there's the website, The Great Courses. She is the one that teaches the Iliad course on that website. It's a very reputable website. And there's G.S. Kirk. He's the editor of the Cambridge volumes on the line by line for the Iliad. And he wrote the first 2 volumes, and he was the editor, you know, for all the rest, even though he had other authors write the remaining 4 volumes. I think those 2 are really good. I think G.S. Kirk is just very objective as far as I can tell. And Emily Van der Veer is just an excellent at taking this mountain of data and fact, and really just distilling it straight to the values of what's going on here. So she's great. For Dante, I definitely Robert Hollander. He's just great. He is extremely objective. He is so admirable. I read a lot of different scholars for Dante, but Robert Hollander was just, I always knew I could rely on him. Always. So
it's actually hard to be objective about something you're so passionate about, because you tend to think everything is awesome, right? If you really love, you know, one poet, or if you love Homer, and you're trying to, and it's hard to admit that there may be some ambiguity in some line, and that there may be genuinely valid different interpretations of its, you know, meaning in the text.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you spend 400 or 500 hours per course preparing for it. You look at interpretations and form your own line by line in the text. How do you then compile that into a course for a person like me who may have not even read the part? I mean, I would read the text first, but only maybe once. So how do you then catch a person like me up to, you know, some acceptable level of understanding using your course?
Definitely more than an acceptable level, I would say. The basic format is twofold. One is there's pre-recorded lectures, and then there's the live class. The live class, just to cover that, because that's brief in terms of what is that, that's when we really talk about the text and discuss it, and students' favorite lines, and what lines did you love, what lines did you hate, what questions do you have, what confusions do you have. I have certain discussion questions of my own to bring to the table. And really only spending like 10 or 15 minutes on the pre-recorded lectures, because we all read that already, or we are heard it already. So then it's like, okay, well, that's when you really get the feeling of reading these texts with, you know, really caring people, thoughtful people. And like, that's, you know, really half of the value of like taking a course and reading this with people. It's that kind of, again, communal value of really getting to enjoy these things with others who care. So that covers like that half, like kind of like the emotional, spiritual half, I guess you could say, or at least the person to person half. For the lectures, that's where I really like get into this getting the substance nailed down and like really isolating that. And the lectures are now focusing on that. Again, like not to make a distinction, like, oh, well, there's the spiritual, emotional half, but then like there's the boring, like, no, oh no, my lectures are good. And the format for the lectures is fourfold. One is the pre-reading introduction, and that's just like a minute to 2 minutes long. It's before you read book 1 of the Iliad or book 2 or whatever, you listen to this part first, because I'm telling you things to look out for, things to focus on, things to watch out for. Because in your reading of this, you can get bogged down and lost in a lot of details and oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? I just give you, here's like the lamppost, the thing you should be looking out for to kind of orient yourself and not get lost in the weeds. The second step is then to read that book, that chapter. And then the third step is to go back to the lecture and listen to the whole recording. And the whole recording is like the actual thing. On average, it's like about like 15 minutes.
So that's a
each lecture.
substantive in-depth analysis of that chapter.
Correct. And that analysis is divided into 3 sections. So the first section was the pre-recording lecture, then there's the remaining 3. The first is the book's integration to the plot and theme. So it's kind of just like a basic plot summary plus, okay, now here's how the pieces in this book, again, chapter, relate to the theme or sub-themes going on in the whole text that I'm keying you into. The second section is the literary values, the poetic literary values going on. And that's when I only choose about 3 or 4, because like you can just like talk all day about each book, and I really could. But I really just try to give like the 3 or 4 best highlights, particularly the ones that you just would not get at all in the first reading. So I give those. And the third section is cultural integrations. So for example, in one book of the Iliad, it mentions one of the Trojan sons of Priam, Tros, whatever, Tros. And then I make a point, oh, this character comes up in the Aeneid, in Virgil's Aeneid. And like, it's this cultural integration. Like, here's something that happened in the Iliad, and here's how it integrates as something in our next course. Some more, things like that. And yeah, I try to keep that, condensed, and, again, 15 minutes on average. This is for working professionals. It's not like here's all my 500 hours of research, and you go figure it out. So it's condensed to the essentials, to the highlights, to the values in each section for your plot and theme, poetic literary values, and cultural integrations that you should be getting in the course.
And then there's a 4th part, right?
No, so the first part was the pre-reading introduction, second, plot and theme, third, literary poetic values, 4th, cultural integrations. Those are the 4 parts.
The next chapter the following week.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Wow. I must say that sounds like it's very difficult intellectually to do. So, you'd have to start with, you would have at some point started knowing nothing about this. You would have read the full text. You would have probably read it many times. Firstly, just to kind of get the context and have your own firsthand understanding. You would have looked at secondary sources and interpretations. Then you would have isolated essentials and looked at, I suppose you would have examined all the questions you would have had and tried to infer what questions would likely arise in any courses you were teaching about this. And then reverse engineer that whole process to create a course that can teach. It sounds like quite an impressive intellectual feat, Nick, so well done.
Thank
you. Currently, if it's not a secret, how many people do you have enrolled in your courses?
But we just wrapped up the Iliad course this Saturday, which is an awesome experience. And many of those students were with me since the beginning. I started with Dante, and they were with me for the Inferno, and then I had a Purgatorio group, and then in the Iliad. So in that course, there was 7, And in the first course, there was like 10 or 11, something like that. So that's the amount. And at
That
least
sounds like
according to
a great
my,
class size too. That's ideal for a
oh yeah,
class.
oh yeah. And
Yeah.
at least according to my students in the Iliad course, they all seem ready and excited for the Aeneid one coming up in September. So I guess I did a good job.
So let's now go into the substance of the classics, actually discuss the specific texts that you cover in your courses. But before we do, make a case for why someone should read these texts. I mean, you can imagine a person thinking, what's the point of reading something written perhaps, well, when was the Iliad written? It was 700 BC, right?
That's when it was written down. Yes.
Yes. So, oh, okay. So it was even older than that. So why should
Yep.
I bother reading something written in 700 BC? I mean, nothing that was true then of life could possibly be true today, right? So why bother?
Sure. All right. Here's the pitch. So two halves to this. The second half is like the direct intellectual answer to this, like the intellectual reasons why, like the moral development and spiritual elevation. Like, but we'll get to that. The first half, though, is covering, like, I think maybe the more important half, frankly, and that's the motivational half. Like, why go through it? If you're aware of the classics, and for those watching, I mean, your audience is intellectual, philosophical, I'm sure they have a pretty decent idea, like this stuff really is valuable, it really is not good. But why go through it? I gotta take this like 2.5, 3 month course with Nick, or like it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of energy. Why do this? And I want to say something about that. And what I want to say is I like to give this hypothetical story, which is fitting because we're talking about why I need these stories. I made this point in a different podcast interview I did, and the hypothetical is the following, which is: imagine if you had a extremely wealthy relative, and you find out through the mail or through email that they had recently passed away and they left you a great fortune, $1 million. This relative left you $1 million. And all you got to do to go cash in on your inheritance is just drive 15 minutes to the bank, go through like 5 minutes of paperwork, and boom, you have that $1 million in your everyday checking account. And then you don't do it.
Might buy you a car park in New York City.
Then you can get that much.
You'd be very
And
rich.
and you don't do it.
Mhm.
And you don't do it because, well, it's a Tuesday or it's a Monday and it's a hassle to drive to the bank. And then I have to find parking, and I don't even have car parking in New York City. And then I have to go in and wait in line. And then I have to talk to the person behind the counter, and they never know what they're talking about. And then I got to like pick up the pen and like do certain things with the pen. And it's like, oh, and you don't do it.
Mhm.
And obviously to us, like that's insane. Like
Yeah.
that amount of effort is so little compared relatively to the big cash value you'll get through going through it.
Mhm.
And that's seriously how I think about the classics. Is this stuff sincerely is our spiritual inheritance as Westerners. For 3,000 years, great men and women of the mind have been creating great works of art, of literature, of achievement. The canon is it's just the best of the best. That's it. It's not the great, it's like the greatest of the great. It's the greatest of the great of the great. There is a guaranteed value. You will enjoy this stuff. You will like this stuff. You will get value from it. Some form or another, you will. And having a course on that really unlocks much more than you would get just on your own. but you don't do it because I have to set aside like maybe 30 minutes here or 30 minutes there, and then I have to listen to this 15-minute lecture, and then I have to go to this 1 hour and 15-minute class. I'm talking about my own classes, right? But it's like relative to the value you'll get from reading these great texts with someone who knows what he's talking about, it's such a little commitment relative to that value. So that's like the first half of the answer. It really is just a guarantee of value when you're
So
with someone who's passionate and cares.
Okay. So let me ask then this. The value of that $1 million example is quite apparent. But people can imagine all the things they can do with $1 million. But what can a person do with the knowledge they gain from the classics?
Yeah.
You talk about this enormous value, and I believe you, but could you concretize it? What specifically is improved in the life of a person who learns the classics?
Sure. And that's the second half. So 3 things. One is you will just get to enjoy a really great story and you'll always remember it. A very emotional time. Just one great example is just a wonderful scene in the Iliad when Achilles finally gets back into the war, but he can't actually fight just yet because he doesn't have his armor anymore. But he needs to do something to help out his friends.
Mm-hmm.
So he is just told by Athena, just go up here to this high plane and just show yourself. That's it. And so he goes, and because he's deeply angered by the loss of his best friend from the Trojan enemy Hector, he goes there and the sun is gleaming on his head. It's like creating like an aura. It really is like in Christian saint paintings. It really is like creating like that spiritual aura. And he shouts and and the whole Trojan army just like gets in this chaos of, oh my God, and they just run away. And this is one of the favorite lines of my students when I was doing the course just recently. And he pointed out, which I never noticed before, like, or it never really registered. During that chaos, 10 Trojans die because they get ran over by chariots or whatever it is. And it's just this incredible scene. So that's one of the 3. It's just a great story. And like, that is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Second part, third. It's the moral elevation, the moral knowledge, the moral examples you get in these stories. And again, that's not a unique to me point. A lot of classicists make this point. Yeah, there's a moral upbringing about moral character, moral education, virtues education. But certainly for this audience that's rational and secular and wants a secular morality, how does that work when like half of these people were Christians and the other half are like from ancient times? Like, how does that work? My view on this is that these great artists have absolutely tapped into deep, deep truths about the human condition. They're not philosophers. They can't get it precisely. Or they can't communicate those truths in an exact manner as you get, reading nonfiction, reading, a treatise. But those truths about the human condition, those deep moral truths, are there in each of these texts. Even the most radically Christian text. And the obvious example for this in Paradise Lost about Adam and Eve and the fall of man and Satan tempting man, and like, how could there be anything valuable there? Satan himself is deemed as the hero by many scholars and many readers because he is a champion of free will, agency, independent thinking, thinking for yourself, to strive for greatness, to strive for excellence, for beauty. He is a beautiful man. It's very clear that Milton was perfectly aware as as an enlightenment thinker, as an enlightenment artist, that these are actually good values. He's not antagonistic to those values. He does think they're good. And so even though he's putting it in the character of Satan, it's like, why is he doing that? What is he saying? There is still these great moral truths in that text and in all the others.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it takes someone who's read these things and digested them to really demonstrate and show how that is the case. So that's the second. There's moral knowledge to be had that will add to your life.
This just quickly, this reminds me of Plato. I believe it's the beginning of, it's either the Republic or the Symposium, when he says that something along the lines, it's the very beginning, it's the very first line. It's like, let us spend a leisure hour and our conversation will be the education of our heroes. So have you come across that?
No, I haven't. I wish I did, though.
I wish I got the quote right too, but it's something along those lines. Okay, so part 3.
Part 3,
mm-hmm.
Final third. It's spiritual elevation, and this is pretty close to the moral knowledge, but what I think I capture in this third part is, now to give a different example, going back to the Iliad. In book 6, Hector is back home in the walls of Troy. He's speaking with Andromache, his wife, and he's with his son, Astyanax, his baby son. And Andromache, understandably so, is saying, please do not go back and fight. We might lose you. You're the only person I have left in my family. So many of my brothers and my father are gone, and you're all I have left. And Hector, projects that. And he goes back to fighting. But he says, yes, I'm going back to fight because that's what's expected of me. I love Troy. I love my family. I love my king. I love my people, my comrades. But none of that equals the value and love I have for you, Andromache. Everything pales in comparison. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. And in this beautiful passage, of course, I don't have it in front of me, but he really makes clear, like, even though he's expected to go and fight, he is demonstrating in that chapter, that his love for his wife and his son is the most important thing in his life. And that's why he's rejecting what she's saying. And that's why he's going to fight. And I think what that gives you, and you could turn that into like a moral lesson, but I think what that really is, like what that really communicates, is a spiritual elevation of your soul. What does it mean to love your loved ones? And what does it mean to really prize them and place them at the top of your life? So much so that you would forego spending more time with them to go and fight and potentially die. And like that deep love you have for them, and the kind of way you hold yourself in relation to them, and the way you command respect eventually in consequence, it really does elevate the soul. Depending on how much you focus and retain that passage, when you think about love and the depth love can have, at least for me, I tend to think of Hector now, especially after teaching this course, because this is one of the passages multiple of my students picked out and referred to back even late in the poem. So it's a great story. There's moral knowledge to be had and spiritually elevating. And that's the $1 million you get for the rest of your life. And it compounds because you always read through more text, you experience more in life, you make more integrations. So not only do you get to have these texts as the experience, you just will always now see connections. And so not only you get your $1 million, but it's like you also have like 500 shares in Amazon. That's the metaphor I'll go with.
Yeah, one thing I love about poetry and history and fictional characters is that as you go through life, you can always compare some situation you're in or somewhere you feel to a very dramatized, much more consequential version of that in either fiction or history, or you can even find lines in poetry that perfectly express how you feel much more effectively than just sort of non-fiction prose could.
Yeah.
There have been several occasions on which I've looked to poetry from Kipling or Tennyson that very accurately reflected how I felt about something, and it kind of gave me the fortitude to move through difficult situations, or the perspective to enjoy really great situations. So perhaps that's something else one gets from the classics.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. You just finished that course on the Iliad that you told us about. Tell us about the Iliad.
Sure. I'd like to answer this question by giving my favorite scene from the given text. So like for the Iliad, my favorite scene is actually, well, now, after teaching the course, I kind of have to think, is this still my favorite scene? But it certainly is my top 3 if it's not. But my go-to example is in book 1, and it's when Agamemnon, who is the Greek leader of all of the army, steals from Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior in the whole army. He steals from him his war prize, Briseis. Briseis is the woman who is his slave, but also the woman he loves and his wife. But he steals her, and we can get into why. But just getting straight to the point, Achilles takes out his sword and goes to kill him. But then Athena comes down and she grabs Achilles by his auburn hair. So just as a fiction point, we know Achilles has brown hair. I love that. Okay, back to it. She grabs him by his hair and she tells him, stop, don't do that. And she has to protect the Greek leadership. But she also knows Achilles is in the right and what Agamemnon did was wrong. So she says, if you don't kill him, you will be compensated 4 times over than what he took from you. So don't fight anymore, and don't kill him and inadvertently stay put and go on strike. Don't fight anymore in the war. And I love that scene because it is book 1 of the first foundational text, and it's literally, metaphorically speaking, human reason grabbing hold of the passions and showing the hero a better way to live, better way to pursue.
But isn't this also exactly what parents do with children? Is they sort of say, I know, I fully understand why you have this reaction, but believe me, if you just don't act on your emotion here, it will pay off in ways you don't yet understand. And it's so frustrating to hear that, but it can be true.
It could be.
You know, you can imagine Achilles not having any way to imagine, well, how could I possibly be compensated just for what I've lost, let alone 4 times over, given that she's all I care about.
That's a big topic. How much control does Achilles and all the others have over their own fate? That's an open question. But certainly the way I take that scene is Achilles accepts it, and yes, it's because, well, you're the god, so all right then. But also because she's Athena. I mean, she's awesome. She's the warrior of the mind. She's a great goddess to have on your side and want to be around. Example, Odysseus. So, you could take it in that sense, but I also do take it as, well, there's any goddess or god you want to listen to and want to, it would be Athena. At least I would say so. But that's my gloss on that.
Okay, so that's your favorite scene from the Iliad. All right. I had sent you several quotes from the Odyssey, if you'd like to go through those.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read them to you, and you can explain the context and the significance of the quote. So this is, as you said earlier, something that Achilles says to Odysseus after his death in the Odyssey. Yes, he's already in Hades, hell.
Correct.
And Odysseus is effectively trying to comfort him, saying, like, it's okay that you're dead here. And he says, no winning words about death to me, shining Odysseus. By God, I'd rather slave on earth for another man, some dirt poor tenant farmer who scrapes to keep alive, than rule down here over all the breathless dead.
Okay, let's talk about it. First, that's beautiful. One of the most memorable lines in all the Odyssey. Just incredible. What a wonderful thing to say. And for Homer to create that scene, that moment. What's going on there? So, and this, this gets back to what is the Iliad and what is it about? So this is a good question to, get that on the table. The Iliad, of course, is about the Trojan War, this 10-year-long war between the Greeks and the Trojans. And the Iliad, though, is just a small slice of that at the end of the war, the 10th year. And it's about principally Achilles. And the story begins with Agamemnon stealing Achilles' war prize, Briseis. And why does he do that? Why does Agamemnon do that? Well, he has to give up his own war prize woman, Chryseis, because he needs to appease the gods. So he erroneously steals from Achilles. It's an injustice, but as we said with the favorite scene, Achilles is prevented from just killing him because he'll be compensated. And that was the standard way of handling problems. You could either A, kill the other person or accept compensation. Compensation is the better route in most cases. So Achilles goes on strike in that he stops fighting in the war until he's compensated by Agamemnon. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Greek army starts to lose horribly without Achilles. And then fast forward, they ask Achilles, please help us. Here's like 10 times the amount. He actually gets more than 4 times. Here's like way more. Here's all this stuff, this gold, this furniture. You'll be lord of these lands and all this. Please come back. Mm-hmm. And Achilles rejects it because he realizes that in his absence from the war, he realizes that no amount of gold or tripods or cauldrons, furniture or lands or rivers can equal the value of life. Nothing is more valuable than life. And he specifically talked about his own individual life. And there's a reason for that, but again, trying to condense this.
At this point in the story, he doesn't desire anymore to die young in glory.
Correct. He chooses, yeah, so that's the further background. His in going to Troy to fight in the war, he had 2 fates he could choose from. 2 fates, so he get to choose his fates. That's how special he is. One was he goes to Troy, mm-hmm. He dies young, but he achieves everlasting glory. Mm-hmm. Everyone will know him. Second option, he doesn't go, he stays home, and he lives a long life. His children will love him. His children's children will remember him. But one day, no one will remember Achilles. But he'll get to live his life out in full. And so, like any Greek warrior, he chooses the glory route. He wants kleos, which is the Greek word for glory. He wants the glory, so he goes. But when in the 10th year of this war, the injustice happens, and he stops fighting for the first time in 10 years. Mm-hmm. And he's thinking about things now for the first time on his own and seriously questioning the war, his society, the values that everyone cares about in his own life. And that's when he realizes, oh my God, no, I should have chose to stay home and live my life in full. This wasn't worth it, actually.
Mm.
So he makes the decision to choose life. What ends up happening is that he then continues to be on strike. The Greeks continue to lose. And his best friend Patroclus, who really cares about his friends, the Greeks, asks Achilles, please go back in the fight and help them.
Mm-hmm.
And Achilles rejects that offer. And so Patroclus goes, well, okay, fine. If you're not going to help them because you're so obstinate and stubborn and arrogant, let me go fight in your stead. Let me don your armor, your Penelope, his spear, and your shield, and let me go fight as you. And Achilles, because he loves his Greek friends and his comrades he's been fighting 10 years long with, of course he does, he gives in. He says, okay, Patroclus, you go fight in my stead. But he says, don't go past this boundary, which is don't go up to the Trojan, the walls of Troy.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's
when, yeah. And then, of course, Patroclus
does.
well.
This does not go well.
This doesn't go well. Patroclus does.
Mm.
He is slain by Hector, the greatest Trojan warrior. And then that's what gets Achilles back into the fight. And thus, that's what gets him to now go back on the glory side of things. Mm. Because he's back in the fight. But of course, he's also really interested in
and by the desire to avenge Patroclus.
Yes.
What is it, Patroclus?
Yeah, Patroclus. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And so, so just to wrap that up, so he does, and then post the Iliad, that's when Achilles is slain because he's back in the fight, right? He's back in the war. And so he dies technically for glory. Like that's what he ended up choosing in the end. And so that's when in the Odyssey, when Odysseus sees him again, that's why Achilles is saying, oh, no. I was wrong to choose glory. I was wrong to have done that because as I realize now here in Hades, nothing is more valuable in life. And I should have just went home and forget the glory and just live out my life with, family and children and my father and being the lord of an estate. That would have been much better than to die sooner and get here in Hades. So that's the full explanation.
So Achilles actually regretted his choice in the end.
He did.
He did. Interesting. I didn't know that. Okay. Second quote. Achilles' love for Patroclus. By the way, is it clear what kind of love is being referred to here?
This is an age-old question.
Yeah.
So no, it's not clear. Different, scholars and commentators have their own views. My view is there's no evidence that it was a homosexual relationship. Mm-hmm. I think all you get from the Iliad is that they were just really close friends, and that's all you could really say. Mm-hmm. But like in the Song of Achilles, I think in that book it does become a homosexual relationship, if I'm not mistaken. I never read it before. This is a modern day book. But yeah, so my sense is just a very close best friendship, which makes sense. I mean, it's 10 years of fighting with this person, and he knew him since like childhood. So yeah, of course he would be really, really, really close with him. In the Iliad, Achilles. So this is now Patroclus is dead. The funeral is going to happen, and Achilles, before the funeral, goes to sleep, and he has a dream. And in this dream, the shade of Patroclus, his best friend, visits him. And he tells Achilles, you have to bury me already because I can't cross over. I can't get into Hades until you do that. Mm-hmm. And so that's what he asks. But Achilles just wants to embrace him. But it's just touching, gripping moment where he does, and he, phases right through him because he's a shade. He's not real. He's not corporeal. But when he does that, Achilles weeps in his dream, and then Patroclus weeps for Achilles, warning him as if he's already dead. And of course, because Achilles has chosen to get back into the war, he is doomed and destined to die. So he's already on his way to right where Patroclus is. So it's this beautiful scene that Homer created of these two best friends in this dream, and they're mourning over each other. It's just lovely. It's really beautiful.
The Aeneid.
The Aeneid. So favorite scene here, again, like to get into like, well, what is this about? So I think I might have two, but sticking with my my go-to answer. So it's about Aeneas, the Aeneid. It's about Aeneas, just like the Odyssey is about Odysseus. And Aeneas is a Trojan survivor. So now this is fast forward the Iliad. The Trojan War is over. They lost, and Troy goes up in flames. Aeneas leads his comrades, the survivors, outside of Troy, and they start traveling around trying to find a new predestined land where they can start anew again. So they're traveling, they're fighting all these different places. Some people stick around, some people don't, but Aeneas has to keep going. He wants to stay back in Troy at one point, he wants to go back. At other points, he wants to stay put here or here. And at one point, he visits Carthage, not neighboring city, but he just travels to Carthage. Again, this is like hundreds of years before the Roman Empire. So this is their foundational story. So he visits Carthage and he meets
just to clarify, the Aeneid is basically a myth that explains how Rome was founded.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And supposedly, of course, this is fictional, but supposedly in this myth, Rome was founded by Aeneas, who is one of the survivors from Troy, the city destroyed by Greeks. Yes.
And the significance of that is he is a son of Venus, the goddess Aphrodite, aka in the Greek. And Aeneas has sons, and they have sons, and they have sons and sons, and that eventually leads to Julius Caesar. So that's why Caesar can say, well, I'm a descendant of Aeneas, and therefore I'm a descendant of divinity, a goddess herself. So that's the big relevance. But yeah, so he gets to Carthage, and he meets the queen of Carthage. Her name is Dido, Dido, Dido. And they love each other. He's a great man. Of course, like, what woman doesn't love a great man, right? Like, he's this awesome human being. And they just fall in love. They love each other. And he wants to stay. He wants to stay in Carthage, and he perfectly well could. And Dido could give him a great life. She can give him the riches and the securities and the comforts of a whole kingdom, and certainly a family and children, and a loving, beautiful wife, and they could command respect and joy and all the great things of life. But Aeneas is eventually visited by Mercury, aka Hermes, the messenger god, and he is told by Mercury, "What are you doing? You know from Jove, Zeus, you know from Jove, Jupiter, that you have to be going and finding this new settlement for you and your people. You can't stay here." And of course, when the gods come knocking, you got to listen, or you're going to wreak travesty upon yourself. And there's this beautiful line, I can read it from the text. And at this moment, Aeneas says, quote, "And now the god's interpreter, Mercury, sent by Jove himself, I swear by my head and by your head and mine," he's talking to Dido, "has brought commands down through the racing winds I say with my own eyes in full daylight, I saw him entering the building. With my very ears, I drank his message in. So please, no more of these appeals that set us both afire. I sail for Italy, not of my own free will. And that is his explanation to Dido as to why he doesn't stay.
Hmm.
It's
It's
because
interesting. He says, not of my own free will, because he chooses to obey the gods. I suppose he means it in the sense that the consequences of disobedience would be so catastrophic.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A beautiful passage. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, the Divine Comedy. I've actually read a little bit of this. So when I was a teenager, I read the Clive James translation.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the courses, we use the John C. Chiardi translation. I think that's just a good balance of all the stuff. Anyway, so this is 1,300 years later from Virgil, from the Aeneid. This is now set in Florence, Italy, and it is written by one man, Dante Alighieri. He is born in 1265, and the first part of the Divine Comedy, the Inferno, is created, not 1289. It's well, this is a vexed topic. Like, when was the Inferno actually created? Some say it's like around what, 1302, 1301, but it's around like the turn of the century.
Mhm.
And anyway, the what's going on here is it begins nel mezzo di camin di nostra vita, midway through the journey of our life. But it's just him talking, right? But it begins with him saying midway through the journey of our life, but he's just talking about himself literally. He is lost in a dark wood of error. And of course, this forest is a metaphor for sin. He meets a couple of different beasts of lions and tiger, a lion and a tiger and a panther, and they represent different sins. And the great metaphor of this, the opening of the Divine Comedy, is that he's lost his way from the true path, the righteous path, the moral path. And he needs to get himself back on track. But when he tries to, he fails. He is too afraid and he succumbs to the beasts of sin around him. And then, all of a sudden, he sees a shade appear, an apparition. And what do you know? It looks just like his favorite poet ever, Virgil. And Virgil goes to him, and it is Virgil. And it says, Dante, you have been lost, and this is unacceptable. And you're so lost that you must, you need like basically a special help. And that's why I'm here.
That's kind of patronizing. Yeah. It's so
Of
crushing
course,
from your favorite poet of all time.
that's a good point too. You actually haven't thought about that. So anyway, so in this becomes the whole journey of the Divine Comedy. It's he
So
can't just go.
Dante is trying to rescue his own soul. He's lived half his life. He's surrounded by sin. He's too weak to resist it. And his brilliant, inspiring guide takes him through. Is it sort of an exploration of all the good and evil within humanity? Is that supposed to be what that whole journey is about?
Correct, because the whole journey is going through the 9 circles of hell, and then effectively the 9 circles of purgatory, and then the 9 circles of heaven. So he's going to journey through the afterlife and get a full understanding of good and evil by meeting a whole bunch of different characters from literature and history, ancient and modern history for his time, modern.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the journey. And I actually don't have lines for my favorite scene, but my favorite scene is in only Canto 2 of the whole poem. So like the second chapter, like very early on.
I think I read it. Yeah.
And it's because in Canto 1, Virgil tells him the mission, and Dante's like, okay, let's do it, let's go. And then in Canto 2, he's like, oh my God, wait, can I do this? Go through hell and then purgatory, then heaven? Like, who am I? I am not Aeneas. I am not Paul. Aeneas journeyed through the afterlife in the Aeneid. Paul journeyed through the third circle of heaven in the Bible, or whatever heaven it was. But he's just an everyday man, Dante. He's not this world famous poet. He's not a big time figure. He's just at the end of the day, just a mortal man. And that's when Virgil tells him the story of why he was chosen. And the story goes, in essence, that there was a lady in high heaven who saw Dante on earth going through a rough time of it and decided that he needs help. And so she, unnamed, but from the context of the rest of the story, it's pretty safe to say it's the Virgin Mother, Mary. She goes to a different woman in heaven below her, Saint Rachel, if I'm not mistaken. And she says, Rachel, it's either Saint Rachel or Saint Lucia. And she says, we need to help him because he's going to be lost without us. And so Saint Rachel, whoever it is, then goes to a third lady in heaven. And this is the big moment. That third lady in heaven is not a saint. It's not a big biblical character. It's not some whoever. That person is just named Beatrice. Beatrice Partenari. And the context of her is that she was a real life person, and she was someone that Dante had loved in life.
Yes.
The story is.
How many sonnets to? I read his first sonnet to her.
Oh wow!
One?
Say it again.
Do you know? Sorry, please finish, and then I'll come back to this.
Oh sure. So Saint Rachel goes to Beatrice, and Beatrice and tells her, like, we need to help him. And how could you not be helping him, Beatrice? This man who loved you so much in life. And then that's when Beatrice goes to hell to get Virgil. And she tells him the mission. And so she literally goes to hell for Dante so that his favorite poet can go to earth and help him out and get him. And the point of this is so that Dante can learn everything about hell and evil and purgatory and making yourself a better person, and then eventually get him back to her in heaven. Oh my God, that is incredible. That is epic. That is beautiful. That is lovely. And this, again, the story is that he met her only when he was 9 years old. And mind you, this is the 13th, 14th century. You're just married off by your parents. You don't get married for love. So he never got to love her. He barely even got to have any kind of real relationship with her whatsoever. But he loved this woman ever since he was 9 years old. It was only when she was 24 in 1289 that she was returning to Florence from a trip, and she had contracted what we would now call malaria. And unfortunately, she had succumbed to her disease and she passed away only when she was 24. And he was also 24, 25. And he was destroyed by that. He was inconsolable. And for years, he didn't know what to do. He tried everything, poetry, philosophy, friends, other women. It just wouldn't work. But there was only one time when he felt better. And that's when he wrote her poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he realized, in order for me to feel better, to bring consolation to myself, I will write Beatrice a poem that no one has ever seen before, that the world has never experienced. And that poem was the Divine Comedy. That is what,
That's.
and I gave a talk on
I
Dante in
mean,
the
the word
past.
romantic doesn't quite begin to describe that.
A lousy little word for what that is. Oh my
Yes.
God, it is. And I guess I have to say, I could go on Dante so much because he's my favorite, but just real quick.
Well,
You
you
go ahead.
reminded me because I don't know much about Dante, but I do know his first sonnet to Beatrice. I believe it was dedicated to her. But the sonnet, interestingly, it switches between different perspectives, three perspectives: the perspective of the man, the perspective of the woman, and the sort of neutral narrator perspective. If I recall it, it goes like this. This is, of course, the translation. The first 3 hours of night were almost spent, the time that all the stars shine down on us, when love appeared to me so suddenly that I still shudder at the memory. Joyous love seemed to me the while he held my heart within his hand, and in his arms my lady lay asleep, wrapped in a veil. He woke her then, trembling and obedient, she ate that burning heart out of his hand. Weeping, I saw him then depart from me. So notice how it switches between the three perspectives.
Mm.
I thought I'd recite that to anyone, but it just seemed very appropriate here.
It is.
Yeah. Great. Wow. I had no idea that the Divine Comedy was written for her. I did hear that she died young, so they never even had a relationship.
No, not as far as we know. No.
That's so tragic. And it produced one of the greatest works in the Western canon.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
I hesitate to call it tragic. Like for him, I feel for him, the man, Dante. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, like it was the first cause for this, my favorite poem of all time. Like he really made the most of it. He really did.
Yeah, he turned something terrible into something very beautiful. Yes. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
heroic for sure. All right. Paradise Lost.
So 300 plus years later, we're now in the times of the Enlightenment. Thank God. And we're now with John Milton, Englishmen. So this is kind of like our poem. We are English speakers, so we get to read this poem in non-translation. We just get to read it straight. And it is about the fall of man and justifying the ways of God to men. How could evil exist? How is this possible? How could God allow this? So Milton is taking up the task right there in line one, justifying, or not line one, but in the first book, trying to basically update the Bible. Because now we have this Enlightenment thought, we have reason and science, but the Bible, it doesn't explain this stuff anymore. It doesn't explain good and evil that much anymore. It's not sufficient anymore. So in effect, Milton is telling the same stories of the Bible, specifically again Adam and Eve and creation of man. But now he's giving a clearly Christian Enlightenment perspective on it. And you can imagine, like, what would that story be like? The mixture of Christianity and Enlightenment. Well, thank goodness we have this whole story to read. But my favorite scene, and this I have quotes for, a quote for. Everyone knows that this story because this is like we're all Westerners. We grew up in Western culture. We know Christianity, whether you're Christian or not. And so there's not much I have to say. It's about the temptation of Adam and Eve from Satan, and then the eventual eating of the apple of the knowledge of good and evil, and then the consequences of that. That's it. And in essence, of course. And my favorite scene is when Satan disguises himself as a snake and he speaks to Eve. And in that conversation, he convinces her to eat the apple. And the kinds of arguments he gives are just incredible. And I want to share one of those arguments. So, mind you, he's a snake, but he's talking. Oh, that's strange. Snakes don't do that. And Eve is asking Satan here, the snake, how is it that you're talking to me? And the snake goes to say that, well, I was a beast of instinct, but then when I ate the apple, I became a being of reason. And so then he makes the point that, well, Eve, you're already a being of reason. So keep that context in mind. And so then he says, quote, regarding eating the apple, he says, quote, why then was this forbid? Why but to awe? Why but to keep low and ignorant his worshippers, even Adam? He knows that in the day ye eat thereof, your eyes that seem so clear yet are but dim shall be perfectly be then opened and cleared, and ye shall be as gods, knowing both good and evil as they know, that ye should be as gods, since I as man, internal man, is but proportion meet, I of brute human, ye of human gods. And in essence, with God, that's incredible. And
it's very persuasive. Yes.
Very persuasive man. And just in essence, to say what happened there, because the poetry is very elevated, the language. Again, saying the same, but I was a mindless snake. I ate it, I became a being of reason. You're already a being of reason, Eve. So when you eat it, you would become like gods, meaning angels. You would become like divinity. And that is just incredible. And that is, metaphorically speaking, kind of is what happens when you have knowledge of good and evil, of ethics, of morality. You are elevated in your personhood, in your character, in your soul, and you are more of what you are now. You know, you're an elevated, higher person. And I just love that scene because, yeah, I do think that is true in a kind of aesthetic sense. And I think it's a really beautiful, beautiful way of putting it.
Well, the philosopher in training in me also likes the eloquence of the argument. It's sort of, well, there are levels of consciousness. The animal level is purely perceptual. The human level is also conceptual. And then you have supposedly this God level consciousness. And so
Correct.
eating this fruit makes you level up by one. So if he leveled up from perceptual to conceptual, then just imagine what would happen if a being who was already conceptual, ate the fruit. Yeah,
Exactly.
It's a nice argument. Yeah, of course, the opposite happens, right? Because she falls along with Adam.
Right.
So,
Correct.
but there's a kind of trade-off. So, Adam and Eve were. Were you at Ocon last year?
I was.
You were. Do you remember when Greg Salmieri put up a slide of Adam and Eve, and he said, "Look at these losers"?
I don't recall that.
It was quite funny. It was in his talk. His point was about values and the importance of work, and the importance of actually living a life and engaging with the world rather than just lounging around in leisure. So the idea is, of course, they became human in the sense that they have to now support their life. That was supposedly Adam's punishment, that he had to
Right.
work, and Eve's punishment was that she had to bear children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's, a positive way to spin it, but I think the consequences are really negative. Like the feeling you get like that, this isn't happy. But the big thing that they do get, and this is like Hector in Book Sense, and now we're making cross integrations. Eve eats the apple, and then she goes to Adam, who didn't eat the apple. And she's telling him what happened and all this stuff and rationalizations. And Adam has to make a decision. Do I A, not eat the apple and continue with God and remain safe and pure? Or B, do I eat the apple and spend the rest of my life with the woman I love? And that's when he realizes that if he doesn't eat the apple, he would be alone. He would have no one. He would have no companionship and no love. And he knows that what makes life so meaningful and special and worth living is having that person in your life. Someone you get to spend every day with, someone that you get to talk to every day, who loves you, who wants to be around you. And so he knows conceptually that really bad consequences would happen to him. But he also knows that life would not be worth living without the person you love.
That's
And
a very
that's
beautiful affirmation of egoism.
Please, yeah.
No, that's all.
Okay.
That would not be what the Bible said about the issue, but it is what Sloss says about the issue.
And Milton absolutely believed that is so much what love is about. It's that companionship, that you get to spend time with that person, that you like that person, that you get to daily conversation with them. But he's putting that in the words of Adam, who's about to do something technically wrong for Christian standards. And that's, again, what makes this poem such an incredible thing to think about. It's like, well, what is Milton saying here? But then also, what is Adam saying here? And like, is he right to do this? And I certainly think he is. But it's a beautiful, beautiful poem.
Well, Nick, thank you very much for telling us about some of your favorite scenes in each of those courses that you're teaching. Will you be repeating this next year once you're finished with 2026?
Oh, yeah. So in September, I'll be doing the Aeneid. We'll be doing that course again, like 2.5, 3 months. Have to make that final decision. And then after that, we'll do Dante, and then Paradise Lost, and then Homer, and then the cycle continues. So
that's wonderful. And we wanted to talk before we wrapped up about modern life and what's missing in modern life that the classics can give a person. And I think the word you used was heroism. So tell us about that.
Sure. So so to start with the contrast, like we did at the beginning of our conversation, like setting the negative, I think we live in a culture of immaturity and crudeness, and just in general, the general proclivity to make everything a joke, to laugh at everything, where nothing is serious and nothing therefore is sacred or reverential. And I think that's a low culture to be in. I don't think that's a particularly good one. And I think what the classics do, as I mentioned, why I read the classics, the third reason, spiritual elevation, the great boon of the classics in this context is that it gives you that kind of characters in universe where things do matter and things are serious and things aren't a joke and things are sacred and things have reverence and people care about their values in each other and their own lives. And to me, the classics can only do so much in this regard. But I think when, tying it all together, when you meet Achilles and he's going on strike and he's passionately arguing against his friends, when you meet Aeneas and he is desperately pleading with Dido, like, please do not ask me to stay anymore. When you meet Beatrice, oh my God, when you meet Beatrice, everything changes. And then when you meet, Adam and Eve and their conversations together and the love and the conversations they have with the angels, you can't leave those experiences without being touched in your heart, in your soul, in your mind of a better way to live, of a better way to speak, of a better way to hold yourself, to comport yourself, to lead your life. And these individuals, these characters, and of course the authors, go step by step to elevate your soul. And that is a most important task, especially for those of us in the 21st century. Very important.
Well, Nick, I can't think of a better note to end on. I can see the passion and the love and the reverence just shining through everything you say. You are one of the people who is most in love with his work that I know. And it's a pleasure to have you on and to just know people like you. And I wish you the very best with your own courses. And I believe that your long-term ambition is to write your own epic novel. Is that correct?
Epic novel and epic poem indeed.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait for it. All right. Thank you so much for coming on today, and I will link your courses in the description for this video so people can go and check it out. Check them out.
Awesome. Thank you, Maxim.
Thank you, Nick.